Vayichan sham Yisrael and get her kulanu ke'echad.
I was always intrigued by the narrative of the two sisters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, whose stories we explore on Shavuos as we learn and read Megillas Ruth. Let's recall the story. Elimelech, a prominent Jew from Bethlehem, relocates with his wife Naomi and their two sons Machlon and Kilion. Machlon and Kilion marry two Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. Tragedy strikes the family. Elimelech dies, both of his sons die. And his wife Naomi is now a widow who lost both her husband and her two children. She remains alone with the two sisters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. They love her. They want to be with her, but Naomi tries to knock sense into their minds and says, listen, you got no future with me. I'm an old lady. Fate has been unkind to me. Go back to Moab and rebuild your lives. You have a bright future ahead of you. Orpah agrees. And the Tanakh tells us in Ruth chapter 1 how both of the girls, both of the young women raise their voices and weep. It's a deeply emotional moment of saying goodbye. Vatishak Orpah lachamoisa. Orpah kisses her mother-in-law goodbye as she bids farewell and goes back to her ancestry, to the home where she came from. But Virus dafkaba. Ruth cleaves to Naomi, and when Naomi says, why don't you just follow the footsteps of your sister-in-law and do the logical thing? Why are you schlepping after me? Ruth responds with those immortal and extraordinary words. Ki el asher telchi elech ubasher talini alin amech ami ve'elekayech elekai basher tamusi amos v'sham ekhaver. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people is my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I shall die, and there I will be buried. And indeed, the rest is history, as they say. Ruth follows her mother-in-law Naomi back to Beis Lechem. They take care of each other. Ultimately, Ruth will meet Boaz. They will get married. She will mother a child whose name is Oved. He will become the father of Yishai, who will be the father of David HaMelech, and the dynasty of Malchus, of royalty among the Jewish people, will be born. Now, when you're reading the story, the focus obviously shifts from Orpah to Ruth. After all, Orpah went back to Moab. She did not join the Jewish people. The focus of Megillas Ruth is, of course, on Ruth. It's called Megillas Ruth, the scroll of Ruth. Ruth, who sacrificed everything, gave up her entire past just to cleave. Virus dafkaba. She wanted to cleave to Naomi, cleave to the Jewish people, connect her fate to the fate of our people, and indeed she becomes the matriarch of the family of Jewish royalty, David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, all the way down till Mashiach. And indeed, it's one of the reasons that's given why we read Megillas Ruth on Shavuos, because Shavuos is the yahrzeit of David HaMelech, as it says in Yerushalmi, David meis ba'atzeres, David died on Shavuos, and therefore we read Megillas Ruth in tribute to commemorating the memory and legacy of David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, who comes from the family of Ruth, and Boaz, Ruth was his great-grandmother. What is fascinating, however, is it would seem at the surface that Orpah's story is forgotten. But that's not the case. And in fact, when we open up a Gemara, we open up Midrash, and we see that our sages have followed Orpah. They haven't only followed Ruth in her life, they also followed Orpah in her new life. And when we come across some of the teachings of the sages, we are quite astounded by what they tell us. For example, if you open up a Midrash Rabbah Ruth, chapter 2, Rabbi Yitzchak says, that night when Orpah left her mother-in-law Naomi, she was physically intimate with 100 men. What inspired or triggered or moved the sages to give us this teaching? I mean, she just left her mother-in-law. It must have been a very difficult moment. I mean, we see in the text of the Tanakh how emotional Orpah was, how emotional Naomi was, how emotional Ruth was. This wasn't easy on anybody. Orpah had a good relationship with her mother-in-law. It's very obvious. Yet our sages say when she left that very same night, she lost all of her intimate boundaries. The Gemara in Masechta Saita asks a very interesting question. The name of Orpah is mentioned in Shmuel. In Shmuel, where is it? Shmuel Beis Perek Chaf Aleph, I believe. Let's see if I have it here. Shmuel Beis Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Beis. The Tanakh mentions Harafa instead of Orpah. It speaks about her 4 sons. Why this name change? So the Gemara tells us in Saita Daf Mem Beis, and I quote again, V'lama nikra shma Harafa shakol doshin oisa kaharefos. Why is there a name change? In Ruth, she's called Orpah in chapter 1 of Ruth. And in Shmuel, she is called Harafa, because everyone would thresh her like the chaff of wheat, which is what Harafa means, the chaff of wheat. Meaning, there was no boundaries when it came to intimacy. What are our sages trying to convey with this teaching, with this message? What motivated them to tell us this about Orpah? Let's change the subject for a moment. And we now come, generations later, to the story of David's battle against the giant, the famous Philistine giant, Goliath. It's a fierce moment. Goliath has been standing and cursing the Jewish people and their God for 40 days. The Tanakh tells us, Shmuel Aleph Perek Yud Zayin, Samuel 1 chapter 17, Vayigash haplishti hashkem v'herev vayisyatzeh arbayim yom. The Philistine approached the Jewish camp in the morning and in the evening, 40 days, threatening, harassing, intimidating, driving fear and dread into their heart. And then finally, when David is given the go-ahead by King Shaul to go confront this giant, and this Philistine sees David, and he starts cursing David, and he starts cursing his God. We know, though, that with his slingshot and the 5 stones, David ultimately defeats Goliath. And here, the Gemara gives us a very interesting teaching, Saita Daf Mem Beis. Asks Rabbi Yochanan, why did the Philistine approach the Jewish camp in the morning and in the evening? Hashkem v'harev, and he says, K'dei levatlam mikrish meshachris v'arvis. Rabbi Yochanan says he wanted to make them omit the recital of the Shema in the morning and in the evening. Why did he do this for 40 days? Says Rabbi Yochanan, again, Talmud Saita 42, Keneged arbayim yom shenitna behen Torah. The period corresponds to the 40 days in which the Torah was given. And now I ask you, Ribono Shalom, when did Goliath become such a Talmud Chacham? He knows exactly that there are 40 days after Matan Torah when Moshe Rabbeinu learned the whole Torah, and he makes sure to go out 40 days in order to correspond to the 40 days of Matan Torah. Goliath was such a mystic. Goliath was such a Jewish historian. Goliath really cared about the 40 days of Matan Torah, and not only that, he made sure not to come out in the middle of the day, not to come out in the middle of the night, not to come out late morning. He made up to come out for the Vasikin minyan, Hashkem, Vaharev, and for the evening minyan. Why? Because there's a mitzvah of Krishma twice a day. B'shach b'cho b'kumecha, and then b'shach b'nei adam shoichvin, b'shach b'nei adam oimdin, and Goliath makes sure that he's going to obliterate the mitzvah of Krishma. Rabbi Yochanan sees in Goliath not just a Philistine, athletic, giant, a powerful, muscular, mighty, ferocious warrior, but actually sees in his actions a very intricate and delicate ideological conflict against Judaism. 40 days. Hashkem v'harev, morning and evening. I finally want to address one more fascinating statement by Rabbi Yitzchak in Saita Mem Beis. Says the Gemara, V'atishak Orpah l'chamoisa v'Rus dafka ba. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Rus cleaved to her. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yavoyu b'nei haneshuka v'yiplu b'yad b'nei hadvuka. God said, let the sons of the one who was kissed fall into the hands of the one who was cleaved. Let the children of the one who was kissed be defeated by the children of the one who cleaved. It seems like this kiss was a horrible thing. It's like, oh, she kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her mother-in-law. The children of the one who kissed will be defeated by the children of the one who cleaved. She kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. What is the grace of Eirida? What's the great sin? She was saying goodbye. But Rabbi Yitzchak sees in this pasuk a trajectory for a future. The children of those who kissed will be defeated by the children of those who cleaved. The mystery to all of this will be resolved by going back to that pasuk in Shmuel Aleph Chaf Aleph, where we identify the 4 children of Orpah. One of them is Goliath, which means that when Goliath is fighting David, they are not complete strangers. They actually have a relationship, a very fascinating relationship. David is a great-grandson of Ruth. Goliath is a son of Orpah. Ruth and Orpah, once upon a time, were sisters-in-law. Goliath was very, very close to the Jewish people. His mother married a Jew. Yes, Orpah's Jewish husband was not Goliath's father, but his mother was married to a Jew. She was part of a real, authentic Jewish family, and a great family. Elimelech, Machlon, Kilyon, Ruth, Naomi. Orpah was part of this. She left. She ultimately would mother Goliath and their 3 other sons. But there's a deep connection. There's a deep relationship here. And now we tune into the words of the Maharal of Prague. Chidushei Agadas Maharal in Masechta Soita, Daf Mem Beis. I read to you the words of the Maharal. Zok the Maharal. Ki mi bnei haneshuka hayu kroivim lidabek upirshu. Those who kissed were close to becoming connected, but they left. Ilu loy nashka legamri yeshalech alay mashloi seruya lidabek ve'en kamprisha. Aval kasher nashka ru'uya hoysa lihidabek ki hanoshu kuktsas chibur uparsha. L'kach yavoyu b'nei haneshuka v'yiplu b'yad b'nei hadvuka ki hamisnagdim yiplu ze b'yad ze. The Maharal, in very brief and concise and complicated language, is opening up our minds and expanding our horizons to understand the subplot behind the story. You see, Orpah didn't just leave her mother-in-law. Orpah left her mother-in-law with a deep void. Orpah was connected to her mother-in-law. Orpah appreciated the spirituality, the faith, the depth, the holiness, the sanctity, the purity embedded in Jewish life. Orpah, just like Ruth, was a sensitive soul. She too melted in the glow of Yiddishkeit, in the ecstasy of a life truly permeated with Yiras Shamayim, Avas Hashem, Avas HaTorah. Orpah felt in the depth of her soul the authenticity, the meaning, and the purpose that Judaism discovers in every moment of time and every centimeter of space. Orpah appreciated the fact that in Yiddishkeit, every life had absolute meaning. Every person was a manifestation of God in this world, and that the world had a moral calling. Orpah, in a word, appreciated Naomi, Hinoyam Hashem Elokeinu, the Noyam, the Neimus, the sweetness and beauty of Torah and mitzvahs. But she also understood the sacrifices involved. The Gemara tells us in Yevamos that at that moment when Ruth wanted to cleave to Naomi, Naomi taught her some of the basic components of Yiddishkeit, explaining to her that this may not be worth it. Naomi gave Ruth a basic tutorial in many of the halachas, explaining to her, do you really need this burden? Orpah understood, I know the beauty, I know the sweetness, but the burden is too difficult, and therefore Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. Says the Maharal, when you kiss somebody, it means there is love, there is connection. We're not talking about a fake kiss of a con artist, a manipulative kiss. This is an authentic kiss. She loved Naomi. She wanted Naomi. But there was another lifestyle that was so promising, that seemed so rewarding. The superficiality of Moav, the dazzling brilliance, the hype, the oomph, the zeitgeist of Moav lured Orpah into its powerful embrace. She kissed Naomi goodbye. But can you ever say goodbye to your deepest calling? Can you ever farewell to your destiny? Can you ever detach yourself from a truth that you sense deep down in your innermost heart with every fiber of your being? How could you? Some music, once you hear it, there's no turning back. You know this is where it's at. You may wander, you may roam, but there's always the voice in you that reminds you of that song, that reminded you of truth. And that's why that night, Orpah couldn't just go home, eat dinner, light a candle, read a book, and go to sleep. That would have been the normal lifestyle of a fine Gentile woman. Orpah was experiencing such profound guilt, or I should say such a profound sense of emptiness, such a profound void. How do you distract yourself? How do you fill that void? She had to go to the other extreme. What does the Gemara say in Sait, and the Midrash says? Orpah actually completely neglected her own dignity and modesty. She destroyed all of her boundaries in terms of intimacy. She allowed her body to become, as the Gemara says, a chaff of wheat. She was with 100 men that evening. What does this even mean? What does it mean? It means that sometimes the greatest addicts among us are the most sensitive people, are the most spiritually sensitive people, because they are so spiritually acute and sensitive. Therefore, they cannot distract themselves with cotton candy and a slice of pizza and a piece of cheesecake. No, that doesn't work for them. Their spiritual soul yearns and cries too deeply for them to feel respite, for them to feel serenity. They have to cover such a deep void. They have to compensate for such a deep void. They got to go to other extremes. They have to let go of everything. They have to abandon their entire past to be able to feel a little tranquility and serenity, which is really fake and superficial, because tomorrow the addiction is only going to accelerate. And you know, parents, what we experience unconsciously, our unresolved tension and anxiety, goes on to our children. We all know this. Our children challenge us to work on ourselves if we're open to the challenge. And it's a blessing. It's a blessing. Your children help you become aware of things that you were unaware of. And as a result of that, you can really find a path towards deeper enlightenment and wisdom and healing. When Orpah has a baby named Goliath, by osmosis or through epigenetics, he experiences the conflict in his mother's life, the cognitive dissonance that characterizes Orpah. Goliath is not just a stranger to the Jewish people. Goliath is not just a person who read a textbook against the Jewish people or went to a website of anti-Semitism. No, Goliath has Judaism etched somewhere deep, deep, deep in his neshama from his mommy Orpah, and therefore he cannot just ignore the Jewish people. He doesn't know how to ignore us. He must ferociously fight them with anger and disdain because he's trying to repress a voice within himself. When I become so angry at somebody else, so often it's my anger towards a voice in me that I cannot tolerate, and I have to destroy it. That's why he cannot just come out and fight the Jewish people. 40 days. The 40 days of Torah simmers, it vibrates in the subcellars of his psyche. He must obliterate it. The Kriya Shema of the morning and the Kriya Shema in the evening. The mission statement of the Jewish person. I wake up in the morning and I live with oneness, and I go to sleep at night and I live with oneness. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Goliath at last feels now is my chance to eradicate it, to uproot it, to destroy it. So maybe one day I will be able to feel serenity. Orpah did not have the courage to cleave to that which was true. She wanted the cake and eat it too. She kissed her mother-in-law, but she couldn't cleave to her mother-in-law. That's the story of Orpah. Contrast that with the story of Ruth. Ruth had the courage to cleave. She had the courage to have dveikus. What does the Gemara say about Basra Daf Yadalad? Rabbi Yosef said, Lama Nikra Shma Ruth. You know why she was called Ruth? Sheyatzam emena David sherivo lakadosh baruch hu b'shiras v'sishbachis. Because they're descended from her David, who satiated the world and satiated God, so to speak, with songs and praises. The Gemara says in Midrash says in Midrash Ruth chapter 2 that Ruth is called Ruth Shirasa b'divrei chamaisa. She truly saw and appreciated the words of her mother-in-law. She connected. Orpah hafcha oiref lachamaisa. Orpah, she turned her back. Oiref is the back, the nape. She turned her back to her mother. In each one of our lives, there are voids that live in us, and we have a choice. The choice is, will I distract myself? I'll distract myself through work, maybe through academia, through learning, through exercise, sometimes healthy things or unhealthy things, but they are distractions. I'm not ready to face my void and see what I'm really, really looking for. That makes the difference between Ruth and Orpah, and ultimately is manifested in the great distinction between David and Goliath. Ruth was wholesome with herself, not because she didn't have conflict, but because she had the courage to choose her true self. She lived a life based on her innermost values. Orpah ultimately sold her soul for external distractions, and it never ever gave her peace. And in our own life, we must choose. Are we going to kiss or are we going to cleave? Thank you very much. Chag Sameach. Kabbalat HaTorah b'simcha u'b'pnimiyus. May we all be united to be able not only to kiss, but also to cleave. Thank you.
Oy oy